Any trucker will tell you the one thing you don't drive past is a flare. You drop your speed, you radio it in, and you thank whoever lit it. That's the code, which is exactly why I almost died. I've been driving long haul out of Las Vegas for 19 years. Refrigerated freight, produce, pharmaceuticals, some restaurant supply. I've run Route 93 north through Nevada probably 200 times. That stretch between Vegas and Ely is one of those drives where you stop seeing the road after a while. Flat, dark, white line, mile markers going by at 65. You get used to it the way you get used to anything you do enough times. You stop noticing. That changed the night of October 14th, 2022. It was 2:47 a.m. I know the time because I checked my logbook right before I spotted it. I was running 15 minutes behind schedule, had a refrigerator unit that had been acting up outside of Henderson, a loose cable on the temperature sensor that had cost me 2 stops to diagnose. Nothing dangerous, just time-consuming. I was pushing to make it up on a stretch of highway I could have driven in my sleep. No other headlights in either direction, no side roads, no structures, just desert on both sides and whatever my high beams could reach. That's when I saw the flare. It was burning on the shoulder about a half mile out, that orange-red glow you can't mistake for anything else on a dark highway. I was already lifting off the gas before I consciously thought about it. That's how deep that response is wired in after 19 years. Hazard ahead, slow down, be ready to help. I got on the CB and called it out, then started scanning the shoulder for whatever broke down. Here's where it started feeling wrong. I got within maybe 300 yards of the flare and there was nothing on the shoulder. No vehicle, no broken down car, no trailer, no motorcycle. Just a flare burning by itself on the gravel, full length, burning hard. And it was new. I could tell by the intensity. A fresh flare burns with a sharp orange-white core. This one hadn't been out there more than 10 or 15 minutes. There's no reason to light a flare on an empty shoulder with nothing broken down next to it. I told myself maybe they'd pulled further ahead, out of my sight line. Medical situation, maybe they needed to move. I kept coming down in speed, watching the road. Then I saw the second flare. It was about 100 yards past the first, and this one wasn't on the shoulder. It was laid across the outbound lane, burning flat on the asphalt, forcing anyone coming through to shift left. I started to brake, eyes moving to where the left lane would carry me. And that's when my high beams caught the board. Plywood, a full sheet of it, flat on the pavement, running about 6 feet across the left lane. Dark wood against dark asphalt. I was maybe 80 yards out when I picked it up and I hit the brakes hard. The trailer swayed. I got the truck stopped about 20 feet short. I sat there maybe 10 seconds, engine running, trying to process the fact that someone had driven out to a stretch of empty highway in the middle of the Nevada desert and built a tire destruction device and set it in the road. That's not road debris. That's not an accident. That's preparation. That's someone who drove out there ahead of time, positioned the flares to force a lane change onto the board, and then waited. Waited for what came next, which I was about to find out. I put the truck in reverse to back away from the board, and that's when I saw them. 2 men came out of the brush on the west shoulder, about 50 yards behind me, walking fast, not running, coming toward the truck, both of them wearing high-vis vests, the orange reflective kind DOT road crews use. One of them had something in his hand, and it took me a second to figure out what it was, because it was so far from what I was expecting. A clipboard, not a weapon, a clipboard, and high-vis vests. They were dressed to look like road workers, coming to help the poor trucker who'd just blown out his tires and was sitting helpless on a dark highway 60 miles from anything. I didn't wait to work through the rest of it. I put the truck in drive, cut hard right onto the gravel shoulder to get around the board, and went. The cab bounced hard coming off the lip and the trailer yawed, but I got traction and I got moving. My high beams swept over both men as I pulled out. Both of them stopped walking when I accelerated. One raised the clipboard. The other one just stood there watching me go. I was doing 70 before I hit the next mile marker. I didn't slow down for 18 miles. There's a Flying J at the junction with routes 93 and 318 that runs all night. I pulled in under the canopy lights, parked, and sat in the cab for a few minutes, getting my hands steady enough to dial. I called Nevada Highway Patrol and laid out everything. The mile marker, both flares, the spike board, the 2 men, the vests, the clipboard. The dispatcher took notes and told me a unit would check the location, asked me to stay put. I stayed. The unit called back 40 minutes later. No flares at that location, no spike board. Gravel disturbance on the shoulder consistent with a vehicle having parked there recently, but nothing else. Clean highway. The trooper was calm about it, said they'd had reports of similar setups on isolated Nevada highway stretches over the past year or so. Always commercial vehicles. Always routes where a disabled rig would sit for hours before anyone came by. He said they hadn't made any arrests. I asked him, what happens after you blow 4 tires? After you're sitting there on an empty highway at 3 a.m. with a busted load and 2 men in high-vis vests walking toward you, I wanted to know what they were going to do once they got to the truck. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, we don't fully know yet. That's the part that stayed with me. Not the spike board, not the flares. That answer. We don't fully know yet, which means other drivers have stopped, which means whatever happened to those drivers, the trooper either didn't have enough evidence to describe it or didn't want to describe it on the phone. I found out from another driver about 6 weeks later, a guy who runs that same corridor out of Reno, that a DOT inspector had been reported missing from a stretch of Route 93 about 40 miles north of my incident. That was 3 months before my night. The investigation went cold fast. No trace of him past his last location check on that highway. His high-vis vest was never recovered. Neither was his clipboard. I'm not drawing a line between those two things for you. I don't know what the connection is, but I drive that stretch 4 times a month, and I think about it every single time I see a flare on the shoulder with no vehicle next to it. I don't slow down anymore. I know that's not the code. I know what I was taught. But they built that trap around the version of me that was trained to help, and I'm not going to be that version on a dark highway at 3 a.m. again. My father was a state trooper for 32 years, Idaho State Police, retired as a corporal. I grew up around it. The uniform, the vehicle, the way officers carry themselves when they approach a car. I've ridden along on traffic stops. I know the protocol almost as well as he does. The man who pulled me over on Highway 95 south of Riggins last March almost had it right. Almost. I'm a medical device sales rep. I cover hospitals and surgical centers across southern Idaho and northern Nevada, which means I do a lot of night driving. Rural highways, long distances, towns that are 2 hours apart. I'm used to it. I was heading home from a late dinner meeting in Grangeville. It was about 12:50 a.m. on a 2-lane stretch of 95 that runs through the Salmon River Canyon. No streetlights, no other traffic. The road carved between a rock wall on one side and a drop to the river on the other, 60 miles from the nearest town. The red and blue lights appeared in my mirror without any warning. No car I'd noticed behind me, just lights suddenly there. I pulled over immediately because that's what you do. I put it in park, hands on the wheel, interior light on. My dad drilled that into me before I ever got my license. The vehicle behind me was a sedan, beige, maybe tan, 4-door. As it pulled up behind me, I could see the light bar. It was mounted inside the front windshield, the kind that sits on the dash and projects out. Law enforcement calls those ghost packages. Unmarked units run them sometimes. Legal. But the car was a Hyundai Sonata. Base trim. Looked like. I know police vehicle procurement because my dad complained about it for 3 decades. No department in the state of Idaho runs Sonatas. Not as patrol vehicles, not as unmarked units. The fleet is almost entirely domestic. Ford, Chevy, Dodge, because of maintenance contracts and parts availability. I noted it. Didn't move. Kept my hands visible. The officer got out and came to my window. That's where the second thing caught me. He was holding his flashlight overhand, fist wrapped around the barrel, beam pointing down from the back of his hand. That's a specific grip. Tactical. Learned. But it's the wrong one for a traffic stop. Real officers approach with the flashlight held underhand, up near the shoulder, keeping their weapon hand-free. My dad explained this to me when I was 12 years old. It's not something civilians would know to fake wrong. I rolled the window down. He asked for my license, not registration, not insurance, just license. He didn't have a ticket book, no citation pad, no electronic device, no radio on his belt, no radio at all. There was a badge on his shirt, but it was the kind you can order online, generic enough that it caught the light without giving you any detail. He asked me how fast I thought I was going. I told him I didn't believe I was speeding. He nodded, like that was a reasonable answer. Then he asked me to step out of the vehicle and walk to the rear. That's where I stopped. A real traffic stop, absent a DUI suspicion or a specific safety reason, does not require the driver to exit the vehicle. My father told me that explicitly, and even when an officer does ask you to step out, they don't send you to the rear of the car. That's behind both vehicles in the dark, away from any passing traffic that might see you, away from the dash cam on the patrol unit. I looked at him through the window for a moment. Then I said, "Sir, I'd like to call dispatch and verify your badge number before I step out. I hope you understand." I had my phone up before I finished the sentence. He didn't say anything, didn't reach for anything. He took one step back from my window, turned around, walked back to the Sonata, got in, and drove away. No lights, no acceleration, just pulled back onto the highway and went south. I sat there for probably 2 minutes before I moved. Then I called 911. The actual dispatcher, a real one, confirmed there was no traffic stop at my location in their system. No unit assigned to that stretch of 95 that night. She flagged the report and told me she'd pass it along to the district commander. I called my father when I got home. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You did the right thing, asking for the badge number." He said it the way he says things when something is bothering him more than he wants to let on. About 2 weeks later, I was talking to the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office on an unrelated matter. I have contacts there through my work, and I brought it up. The deputy I was speaking with knew immediately what I was describing. He said they'd had 6 reports in the past 8 months of a man running a ghost package light bar on a beige sedan on that stretch of Highway 95. Always late at night, always targeting single drivers on isolated sections. Every single report ended the same way. The driver mentioned calling dispatch to verify the badge number. The man got back in his car and left. I asked the deputy what he thought would have happened if a driver hadn't said that. He said they didn't know. That was the thing keeping them up about it. Every time they got close to figuring out the pattern, it broke off. Nobody who'd been stopped had stepped out of their car. Nobody had given him what he was waiting for. Nobody could figure out what that was. The deputy told me the Sonata had been caught on a trail camera at a fishing access point about 4 miles south of where he stopped me. The plate came back as a vehicle reported stolen from a rental lot in Boise. It was found abandoned near McCall 2 weeks after my stop, wiped clean, no prints, no DNA, nothing in the car that connected it to anyone. I still drive that highway. I have to. My territory covers 3 hospitals along that corridor, and I can't avoid it. But I keep my phone unlocked on the passenger seat now, dispatch number already pulled up. And if lights appear behind me on that stretch, I put my blinker on, I slow down, and the first thing I say when the window comes down is, "Could I get your badge number and unit number, please?" My dad told me real cops have no problem with that question. He also told me that the ones who do have a problem with it are telling you something. I've driven across that bridge 80 times. I know it the way you know a road you've taken to work for 5 years. Not consciously, not with attention, just in the body. 2 lanes, no shoulder, no pull-off for half a mile in either direction once you're on the span. The kind of bridge where if something goes wrong in the middle, you are in the middle, and that's all there is to it. That night, 2 cars were stopped on it. I'm a traveling nurse, float pool, which means I go where the need is. Sometimes local, sometimes 3 or 4 hours out. I cover Missouri and parts of southern Illinois, and the route home from the hospital in Quincy takes me across a 2-lane bridge over the Mississippi, out on Route 61. I know that bridge. I've crossed it in fog, in rain, in the dark, in every condition it offers. It was 11:50 p.m. I was coming off a 14-hour shift, and I was running on autopilot and bad coffee. Lights ahead on the bridge. I registered them as brake lights before I registered what they meant. And by the time I understood that 2 cars were stopped nose to nose on a 2-lane bridge with no shoulder and nowhere for me to go, I was already on the span. My first thought was accident. 2 cars hit each other. They stopped. Everyone gets out. Standard. I slowed down and scanned the cars for damage. No glass on the pavement. Windshields intact. No deployed airbags visible. And no crumple. I'm looking at both front ends and the bumpers are clean. Even a low-speed collision leaves something. These bumpers looked like they'd never touched anything. I worked in a trauma bay for 4 years. I know what accident scenes look like. This was not one. There were 4 men outside the 2 cars, 2 per vehicle, all of them pacing, not in the frantic way of people dealing with a crisis, but in the deliberate way of people doing something organized. One of them had his phone raised, which I first read as filming the scene for insurance purposes. Then I noticed where he was pointing it, not at the cars. He was filming the lanes behind the stopped vehicles. He was filming the direction cars would approach from. He was filming me. I checked my rear view. The bridge behind me was empty when I'd driven onto it. Now there was a pickup truck stopped about 30 yards back, hazard lights blinking, blocking the lane behind me. No one had been there. I hadn't heard it approach. It was just there. I had my phone in my hand before I finished the thought. I dialed 911 and it connected on the second ring. A woman's voice, calm. 911, what's your emergency? I told her exactly where I was. The bridge, Route 61, the 2 stopped cars, the men, the pickup behind me. She said, ma'am, we already have a unit responding to that bridge. You need to stay in your vehicle. I said, okay. I looked ahead at the 2 cars, looked in my rear view at the pickup, then looked ahead again as one of the men started walking toward me. Hands out, the way you hold them when you want to signal harmless. He was maybe 40 yards away, walking straight at my driver's side. I have almost 13 years of clinical experience. I've worked codes, I've worked traumas, I've worked nights alone in underfunded rural facilities. I know what controlled looks like versus chaotic. That man's walk was controlled. No urgency in it, no fear, no relief at someone stopping. He walked toward me the way a person walks toward a thing they've already decided belongs to them. No police unit came. The man was 20 yards out. I looked in my rear view. The pickup was still stopped behind me. Then I looked at the gap between the 2 stopped cars and the concrete railing on the pedestrian walkway alongside the bridge. It was narrow, maybe 6 inches wider than my car on each side. I took the gap. I don't entirely remember making the decision. I remember the sound of my right mirror snapping against the concrete railing and the scrape of something along the passenger side, and then I was past the 2 cars and accelerating, and the bridge was empty ahead of me. I came off the far end of the span going about 55, and I didn't slow down until I hit the first traffic light in Louisiana, Missouri, 4 miles up the road. I pulled into a gas station and sat under the lights and tried to get my breathing even. Then I called 911 back to give them my new location, and that's where things shifted. The dispatcher who answered had no record of my previous call. I gave them my phone number, the timestamp, everything. They checked. There was no 911 call from my number that evening. No record of a prior dispatch to the bridge. No responding unit had been sent. I went home and pulled up my call log. The call I had made from the bridge was listed in my history. 1 minute, 14 seconds. I clicked on it. The number I had called was not 911. It was off by 1 digit. The area code was right, the next 3 numbers were right, and the last digit was a 4 instead of a 1. I have 911 in my contacts, and I know my muscle memory, and I have called that number 100 times in my career. I do not dial 4 instead of 1. I have no explanation for how that happened. The next morning, I filed a full report with the county sheriff's office. An officer went out to the bridge, no vehicles matching my description, no debris from my mirror, which I'd confirmed was broken, anywhere on the span. Nothing. The officer was professional and took everything I said down in writing. But at the end, he asked me if I'd had any alcohol or medication that evening, and I understood what that question meant. The right side of my car has a 14-inch scrape along the door panel and a missing passenger mirror. The damage happened somewhere. The concrete on that bridge is textured and distinctive, and if someone wanted to find the transfer marks, they could find them. Nobody went to look for them. I still cross that bridge once or twice a month. I have to. The hospital in Quincy is part of my usual rotation, and there's no other reasonable crossing for 30 miles either direction. But I go in the right lane now, not the left. I don't know why I think that helps. It probably doesn't. What I do know is that there are no accidents on that bridge in the sheriff's database for the month this happened. No calls, no reports. I checked, which means no one else who was on that bridge that night filed a report, which means either I was the only car they stopped, or the others didn't make it off the span. I've been through that automatic car wash probably 60 times. Same car wash, same time, same routine. It's on my way home from the facility I work security at. It's open 24 hours. And after an overnight shift in a commercial building with no windows, there's something about driving through the rinse cycle at 2 in the morning that I find, I don't know, calming, maybe. Like a reset before I go home and try to sleep during the day. The only time I ever locked my doors on the conveyor was the last time. I do overnight security at a distribution facility in Phoenix. Cameras, patrols, access control, the standard stuff. It's not exciting work, but it pays well, and the nights are mostly uneventful. I've been doing it for 3 years. I'm used to empty spaces at weird hours. I'm used to being the only person somewhere that's built for hundreds of people. You get a feel for when something's off because you spend so much time around nothing that something registers immediately. It was a Tuesday night in August, just before 2 a.m. I pulled into the car wash off I-17, ran my credit card at the kiosk, and drove onto the conveyor rails. The rollers caught, and the car started moving forward. I always put it in neutral and just let it ride. Radio on low, windows up. The wash sequence starts with a high-pressure pre-rinse, then the soap arch, then the big rotating brushes, then a second rinse, then the dryers. 5 stages takes maybe 4 minutes. I know the timing well enough that I can tell where I am in the cycle with my eyes closed. Between the pre-rinse and the soap arch, I saw the silhouette. It was on the passenger side of the car, walking alongside it, matching the conveyor's pace exactly. I registered it before I understood it. Just a shape in my peripheral, slightly darker than the surrounding dark of the wash bay, moving with me. My first thought was an employee checking equipment. They do that sometimes. Maintenance issues, jammed brushes. It's not common, but it's not impossible. Then the soap arch went over us, and the figure was still there, moving with me in the thick foam. And I realized nobody walks through an active car wash next to a customer's vehicle. There's no safety protocol that involves that. The wash bays have a clearly marked no entry during operation sign on both sides. Whoever was in there was not there because of their job. I reached over and locked all 4 doors. That's when the figure moved toward the car. A hand came out of the dark and touched the passenger window. Slowly, dragged a flat palm down the glass through the soap, leaving a clean streak. Not knocking, not banging, just touching. The kind of deliberate movement that's worse than aggression because it has no urgency in it. Just contact. I put my hand on the gear shift. I didn't know what I was going to do. The car was on the conveyor. I had no room to maneuver. The brushes were ahead and the pre-rinse was behind. I was in the middle of a tube. I couldn't exit at speed without tearing something off the car. Then the conveyor stopped. The rollers were still moving. I could feel them spinning under the tires, but the car wasn't advancing. Something had jammed the forward motion. In the silence under the rushing brushes and the dripping foam, I could hear my own breathing. The figure had moved. It wasn't on the passenger side anymore. It was at the driver's window. I didn't look directly at it. I kept my eyes forward, on the brushes, on the exit 30 feet ahead. I was thinking about the distance between me and that exit, whether I could drive the car off the conveyor tracks without destroying the undercarriage. The dryer fans kicked on, that loud, sustained blast of warm air that hits you in the last 15 feet before the exit. The noise was enormous, and through it, underneath it, I heard the door handle move. Not the sound of someone trying the handle, the specific mechanical sound of a handle being depressed, tested, held. The door didn't open, it was locked, but whoever was holding that handle knew it. I put the car in drive and I floored it. The front tires caught, and the car ripped sideways off the conveyor rails. I heard something snap under the chassis, and the car dropped a few inches on the right side, and then I was through the dryer fans and out the exit and in the parking lot. I kept going. I didn't stop at the lot. I turned onto the frontage road and got half a mile away before I pulled over in the empty parking lot of a closed Walgreens and sat there with the car running. The right front wheel well was making a sound I hadn't heard before. I filed a report at the car wash the next morning when the manager came in. He was apologetic and took me to the security footage room himself. There are 4 cameras on that facility, one at the kiosk, one at the entrance, one covering the vacuum stations on the far side of the lot, and one at the exit. The wash bay itself, the interior of the tunnel, does not have a camera. The manager explained it's a liability issue. they don't film the interior because of privacy concerns about vehicles being during the wash. The footage shows my car entering the wash bay. It shows the bay sitting apparently inactive for about 4.5 minutes. Then it shows my car exiting at the wrong angle, clipping the edge of the exit frame. The footage shows no other person entering the wash bay before me or during the wash or leaving afterward. There is no camera angle that covers the inside of the tunnel. The undercarriage damage was a broken front sway bar end link, about $280 to fix. I have the receipt. The car wash management sent me a formal letter denying responsibility because I exited the conveyor in an unapproved manner, which I understand is probably what their liability coverage requires them to say. I don't go back there. There's another 24-hour car wash about 8 miles further from my house that I use now. It costs more per wash and there are cameras inside the bay. What I keep thinking about is the clean streak on the passenger window. The foam was thick. It takes a full hand press to drag a clean line through it like that. That takes time. That takes standing still and pressing and pulling down in one deliberate motion. That's not someone who wandered in by accident. That's someone who knew they had 4 minutes and was in no hurry to spend them. I drive the same route 4 nights a week, have for 6 years. I work for a regional beer distributor out of Cobleskill. We supply bars and restaurants across Schoharie County and parts of Greene and Delaware counties, and my overnight run takes me through about 80 miles of back road before I get home. Route 30, Route 1 and 45, the county routes in between. 2-lane roads through farmland and small towns, mostly empty after 10 at night. I know every pair of headlights that should be on those roads at that hour. I know which farms still have porch lights on at midnight. I know which stretch of 30 has the deer problem in November. I know this route the way you know your own kitchen in the dark. That's why I noticed when there was one extra set of headlights. It was a Tuesday in early October, about 12:40 a.m. I was heading home after my last drop, a bar outside of Middleburg. I came out of their rear loading dock, turned east on County Route 1, and started the 35-minute drive home. The road was empty the way it always is that time of night, maybe one other vehicle every 10 minutes. About 2 miles out, a sedan came from the opposite direction and passed me. Nothing unusual. I noted it without thinking about it. 2 minutes later, the same sedan was in my mirrors. I know because it was a dark blue or dark green 4-door. I'd caught it in my headlights going the other way, and the headlight pattern was distinctive. Older model, slightly asymmetric. Same headlights now behind me. It had turned around somewhere on the 2 miles between us. People turn around on back roads all the time. Wrong turn, forgot something, changed their mind. I tracked it in my mirror and went back to the radio. Then I came to the intersection at County Route 9, and the second car was already there. Not approaching, already at the stop sign, nosed out, waiting. A sedan, different car, same dark color, similar vintage. As I passed the intersection, it pulled out and fell in behind the first car. Now there were 2 headlights behind me, spaced maybe 80 yards apart. I took note of it. 2 cars going the same direction on an empty county road at 12:45 a.m. could still be coincidence. People drive home. People go where they're going. I took a right on the next county road, not my usual route, an unplanned deviation. Both cars followed. I watched them take the turn, one after the other, unhurried. I took a slow breath and ran through it. Maybe they live on this road. Maybe it's 2 people who happen to be making the same unplanned turn at the same time. I kept driving and waited for one of them to peel off. I hit a left turn, took it. Both cars took it. The second one moved up slightly. Now it was maybe 60 yards behind the first, both of them maintaining even spacing, no acceleration, no closing. I want to be honest about what was happening in my body at that point because I don't want to overdramatize it. It wasn't panic. It was more like the feeling you get when you realize you've been driving past your exit for 10 miles. That slow recognition of a situation you're already in the middle of. I was doing the math. 2 random cars don't make 3 consecutive unplanned turns on empty county roads at 1 a.m. That's not how randomness works. What was happening behind me was deliberate. I didn't have a plan. I just drove and kept my eyes moving between the road ahead and the mirrors, and I tried to think. I came over a small rise, and the T-junction at Route 145 was about 300 yards ahead. In my headlights, I could already see the third car. It was parked at the junction, perpendicular, blocking the left turn lane. No lights, no hazards, engine running. I could see the exhaust in the cold air. Just sitting there, bridging the left turn, leaving only the right turn available. The right turn went deeper into farmland. Less traffic, fewer structures. I knew that road. It ended in a dead end at a state forest access gate about 4 miles in. I took the right and immediately killed my headlights. It's a dangerous thing to do on a back road in the dark, but I know that stretch well enough that I could hold the center line by feel, and going dark meant the cars behind me had lost my taillights. I got about 400 yards down the road and swung into a farm field access lane. 2 tire tracks through grass, used for tractor access. I killed the engine. The 2 sedans went past on Route 145, maybe 30 seconds apart. Moving faster now, neither turned. I sat in the field with the engine off for about 15 minutes. Then I called the state police non-emergency line. The trooper who responded came out and listened to the whole thing. He drove the route I described, found nothing, came back. The next morning, he called me back. He'd run the partial plate I'd gotten on the first sedan through the DMV system, and then widened the search based on make and model and color in the county. What came back was unusual enough that he called someone in Albany to verify. All 3 cars were the same make, model, year, and trim level. Same manufacturer's color, the exact same factory code, not just a similar shade. They had come from the same fleet, a rental company out of Albany that had gone bankrupt and liquidated its vehicles at auction about 14 months prior. The whole fleet had been sold to a single buyer, 1 transaction, 1 check. The buyer was an LLC registered in Delaware. The registered address for the LLC was a P.O. box in Albany. The P.O. box didn't exist. The street number was valid, but the box number had never been issued. He told me that without knowing the LLC's principles, he couldn't do much. The cars were legally sold. The owner couldn't be reached. There was no law against 3 cars driving the same route on a public road. He asked me if anything had happened. Any contact, any attempt to stop me, anything he could put in a report as an incident. I said no. He said he'd flag the vehicle descriptions and keep an eye out, but that was about what he could do. I thanked him and went to work. I still run that route 4 nights a week. I still know every headlight that belongs out there. And sometimes, usually when I'm tired, I start counting them. 1 pair at the far end of the straight, 1 pair behind me, 1 waiting at a junction ahead, just to remind myself what 3 looks like before I'm in the middle of it again. I haven't seen them since October. I don't know if that's because they moved on or because I know the route well enough to count the headlights. Both of those possibilities bother me for different reasons. Every person in these stories got away. I want to be clear about that because it matters. They got away and they're still thinking about it. Some of them changed their routes, some of them changed their jobs. One of them counts headlights now on a road he's driven 6 years. If you do the same, smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss the next one, and tell me in the comments, which of these 5 do you think took the most planning? Because someone put serious thought into each of them. I'd like to know which one you couldn't have seen coming. The next video goes somewhere you probably stop at least once every long drive. Somewhere you pull in because you need to, not because you want to. Somewhere the lights are always on and there's always at least 1 other car in the lot, so you never think twice about getting out. Click now to watch 4 disturbing gas station horror stories. You'll still stop. You'll just do it differently. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.